All right. So we're going to jump right on in here. We're on page 104 in the chapter called Visit to Vidyasagar. And he's been talking to Vidyasagar over the last page. And now he's talking about the Gyani, the path of Jnana, of knowledge. So, and interestingly enough, he talks about a path of love and knowledge combined in this next paragraph, which is kind of something that I was rather excited to see because I kind of feel like that's where I'm playing these days. All right, so he says, he's talking to Vidyasagar. He says, a man cannot live on the roof for a long time, meaning at that top level of practice and realization. Actually, for an ordinary person, we go into samadhi and we leave the body behind. The body drops off after a few days. So he mentions here coming back down from that plane. So he's talking about one of the lower samadhis, not the Nirvikalpa samadhi, because he said that only the avatar can go up and down at will from Nirvikalpa samadhi back into the world. So these other samadhis, these lower samadhis, experiences where the ego to some extent is slightly intact. There's a sense of experience. And so he's saying you can't hold that note very long. You can't. You have to come back down again. A man cannot live on the roof a long time. He comes down again. Those who realize Brahman in samadhi come down also and find that it is Brahman that has become the universe and its living beings. In the musical scale, there are notes sa, re, ga, ma, pa, dha, and ni, but one cannot keep one's voice on the ni a long time. So those are the Indian do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do there. And he's saying, you can't hold that high pitch very long if you can ever get there at all, if you're talking about my voice. So, but one cannot keep one's voice on ni a long time. The ego does not vanish altogether. The man coming down from samadhi perceives that it is Brahman that has become the ego, the universe, and all living beings. This is known as Vijnana. Now, this is a very high state, obviously. That's why it's called Vijnana, this highest, this extra boost jnana, the real knowing, where you actually see. You don't posit. That's the important thing to know about when Vedanta talks about a samadhi or seeing God in everything. He's not talking about like overlaying like a plastic sheet that kind of overlays God in everything that we kind of just practice seeing. It's an actual experience. You actually see that it is God alone that is playing in all of this. It's clear as day to you. You're not mapping a philosophy over a perception of the world. It's actually the perception of the world. It's the actually what you're going to see. And the wonderful thing about this kind of thing that I enjoy so much is that you don't really have, I mean, you have to wait until you've done all the purification and all the work and come to that point where you're able to surrender and kind of give yourself up to mother. There's no shortcut to that. Although mother can put you there anytime she wants. But you can always assume these truths. And to me that's really where the faith comes in, where you may not see God actually in everybody at this point, but you can go ahead and assume that God is there. And just have that inner feeling that you're interacting with the beloved in everything that you do in a day. It's what makes life worth living. It really is what makes life beautiful. This idea of God dancing in all of your actions, with all of your actions, with all of your moods, with everything that you're doing in a day. And by assuming that's what we do when we meditate. We can assume that we have no ego, right? Instead of trying not to have an ego or trying to do something, which is that gaining idea that we're talking about in our other class on Thursday mornings with the Buddhist book. We don't want to have an idea of accomplishment or gaining in practice because that's not what it's about. Practice is about undoing. so that you can see what has always been obvious, so that that which is obvious becomes apparent to you. And so when you're sitting there in your meditation, assume that you are sitting in the middle of God swirling all around you. And that name of that divine is, whatever your ideal is. And that you're not just seeing the body of your ideal in front of you, but you are submerged in the mind and body of your ideal. One of the instructions usually for Vedantic meditation is you sit and you do your mantra and you place yourself in the heart, in the shrine of the heart, and you always have the image of your beloved in there, whatever your highest ideal is. And they usually tell you that the beloved is facing the same direction that you are. So you're not putting the image in front of you and face and going face to face with the divine. Usually the master or mother or Jesus or whoever your ideal is sitting in the shrine of the heart, and you're both facing the same direction. And there's a real important idea around that, because ultimately you're going to merge. And when you're sitting there not having your divine as an image in front of you, the only thing to happen is for you to both take the same space. You both are sitting there together and facing that way. And as you minimize yourself by each mention of the mantra, each singing of the name of God, as you open yourself to the assumption of that presence, even though you may not see it, you may not feel like it's real, your mind might be all over the place, you might feel really shallow, and your vices are all hanging on your ears trying to get your attention. That's all regardless. That doesn't make any difference, because we don't have that gaining idea in our practice. We're sitting in the presence of God, so we are assuming these truths. And in assuming these truths, we reach into our faith. That's why the master says that faith is so important, because you have to be able to assume it to a great degree in order to let go. Because that assumption of God's presence, that assumption of God's grace, that assumption of endless mercy and unconditioned love, that assumption of those things based on faith is what allows us to surrender even before we're ready, even before we really understand it. It allows us to just go through that practice of relaxing and opening more and more in the presence of the beloved. So he's saying that here. He's saying the ego doesn't vanish altogether. That means we still have a sense of I. We're still dancing. It's not just one without a second at that point. The man coming down from samadhi perceives that it's Brahman, it's God, that has become even the ego. Even your ego is God. So this idea of separation from God, it really is a made-up thing. It's a big old fat mistake that we're making all the time. And it's a really good idea to address it as many times in the day as you can, to sit there and become aware of your feeling of separation and surrender it. That's what brings about this silence of mind. Because your ego, we've been talking about that local mind a lot lately. I have anyway, because I'm really into that teaching, and it's really doing wonderful things in my practice of silencing the local mind, the mind that you do all of your thinking in, because that's where the ego manipulates you. That's where the ego creates its assumed existence, is in the local mind with all of your thinking. You thinking to yourself, and you've broken yourself into those two parts, the talker and the listener. That's actually the duality that you're trying to overcome, not this imagined duality of a world and you. The duality you're really trying to overcome is what you've done in your mind, where you've broken yourself into a listener and a speaker. The thinker, which is always going on, and takes the role of the lower bird, the flitting bird that keeps all the different thoughts happening. And we're just wanting to cut that off at the root and to sit in silence through this assumption of the presence of God. And any time you feel the mind try to exert, it's the thing that makes it hard, and the thing that you have to be careful of is that the thought only manages to stay if you think it's your thought, right? If that, when those, because those thoughts that go through your mind, they actually are not your thought. It's not you thinking. Your mind is an organ and it secretes thought in the same way that your body secretes sweat, right? Every thought is directly related to the previous thought. Every thought indicates the next thought. If it was your thought, you would be able to have an original thought in this moment that's not related to the previous thought and that doesn't indicate the next thought. But the fact of the matter is, and you can experiment with this as much as you want, every thought that you have is a product of the previous thought because they're not yours. It's just the wheel of samsara spinning. And so by assuming the presence of God and assuming your release from ego and assuming that grace, which gives you your permission to be in the presence of perfection, in the presence of the divine, without your conscience, breaking down on you or your ego coming in and laughing at your presumption at sitting in the presence of God. It's through our assumption of grace, assumption of the presence, assumption of mercy, all of these things that all wrapped up in the word faith, that we practice, where we spend our life. And little by little, that which we think, that which we imagine becomes real, right? It becomes real. Just like if you're an architect and you're imagining building, the World Trade Center, boom, you thought about it, you imagined it, and now there's, this building, this huge building there. Everywhere that we're all sitting right now, I see all of us are in a building. That building began as an idea. If you go back a certain number of years, you're all sitting in a garden or in the woods somewhere, But what you imagine and what you think is what you become. And so we assume the presence, we assume this unity, we assume this peace. The path of knowledge leads to truth, as does the path that combines knowledge and love, right? So you see that these four paths, one of the great gifts of Sri Ramakrishna Swami Vivekananda, Holy Mother, to us, is this notion that the four paths, excuse me, the four paths are not four disparate paths. They are four methods, and we are predominant in one of them. Probably bhakti. Most of us are bhaktis, and Ramakrishna heavily encourages us to be bhaktis. So, but you can be a bhakti jnana. You can be a bhakti karmic, or you can be a bhakti karma jnani. You can be all of those things, but you're primarily a bhakti, and you bring in the other tools to support that bhakti and to quicken the death of the ego in whatever way is helpful for you. So the path of knowledge leads to truth, as does the path that combines knowledge and love. The path of love, too, leads to this goal. The way of love is as true as the way of knowledge. All paths ultimately lead to the same truth, but as long as God keeps the feeling of ego in us, it is easier to follow this path of love. All right? So the fastest path to God is devotion, is the path of love. If you enjoy jnana, that's fine. Be a bhakti and use your jnana, to spice up your bhakti as it is. The Vijnani sees that Brahman is immovable and actionless, like Mount Sumeru. That only becomes obvious to us when we go deep within the shrine, where we can actually touch or be or sit in the place of our own image of God, our own place of the absolute within, that unchanging self that we don't normally experience because we're always in the mind buzzing around. So we're experiencing body and mind. We're not experiencing that stable, established, unchanging witness, but it's there and you can assume it, and assuming it will help you find it. At some point you'll be like, oh, whoa, 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 whoa. What was that? The Vijnani sees that Brahman is immovable and actionless, like Mount Sumeru. This universe consists of the three gunas, sattva, rajas, and tamas. They are in Brahman, but Brahman is unattached. The Vijnani further sees that what is Brahman is the Bhagavan, the personal God. He who is beyond the three gunas is the Bhagavan, with his 6 supernatural powers, living beings, the universe, mind, intelligence, love, renunciation, knowledge. All these are the manifestations of his power. So this is that beautiful thing, take these little sayings like this and use them in your practice. When you're sitting there in the presence and you think something, you think, wow, my ability to think is the power of this Brahman that I am sitting in right now. When you have a wise thought or an interesting idea that arises, remember, wow, that's coming directly from from the experience of the beloved right here. If you actually feel some love, inside, then know, wow, that is a direct interaction with God. It's not just your mind feeling a certain way or just your mind thinking a certain way. It is God. It is the proof of God's presence, your own existence. And those little things, they just help you while you're sitting, to not sit there and wonder, why am I just sitting here doing nothing for an hour? This gives you that explanation, like everything that you experience in that time, even if it's a noisy mind, even if it's the ego, if you can third party yourself, step aside and look at it and say, yeah, that's an ego, yeah, that's a noisy mind, but you know what, that's a manifestation of the power of my beloved, and he couldn't be doing it if he wasn't here somewhere at this very moment. So let me just be still. Just like the Old Testament says in Micah, I think it is, the Old Testament book, be still and know that I am God. Let's be still and sit in the assumption of God, of this divinity. All of these are manifestations of his power, with a laugh. If an aristocrat has neither house nor property, or if he has been forced to sell them, one doesn't call him an aristocrat anymore. Everyone laughs. God is endowed with the 6 supernatural powers. If he were not, who would obey him? Just see how picturesque this universe is. How many things there are. The sun, the moon, the stars, and how many varieties of living beings. Big and small, good, bad, strong, weak, some endowed with more power and some with less. Vidyasagar. Has he endowed some with more power and others with less? Master. As the all-pervading spirit, he exists in all beings, even in the ant. But the manifestations of his power, yes, they are different in different beings. Otherwise, how can one put 10 to flight, while another one can't face even one? And why do all of these people here respect you? Have you grown a pair of horns? You, you have more compassion and more learning. Therefore, people honor you. They come and pay their respects to you. Don't you agree with me? Vidyasagar smiled. The master continued. There is nothing in mere scholarship. The object of study is to find means of knowing God and realizing him. A holy man had a book. When asked what it contained, he opened it and showed that on all of the pages were written the words Om Rama and nothing else. What is the significance of the Gita? It is what you find by repeating the word 10 times. It then gets reversed into Tagi. Gita, 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 Tagi. The TA becomes attached to the first half of the second word. He says you find it repeating a word 10 times, it's reversed into tagi, which means a person who has renounced everything for God. Now, what is it to renounce everything for God? Normally, because we live in the world of the mind and the world of the body, we normally associate it with objects, all this stuff out here. Oh, I'm going to renounce this pen. I'm going to renounce this stick-it note. I'm going to renounce this camera. I'm going to renounce this computer. Fine. Doesn't really matter. Those things, there's thousands and millions of those things, and you can go on renouncing all the time. More importantly, is this renouncing of your own self. Now, how does this happen? That's what allows you to silence the mind. Your existence happens in the mind. All of your opinions, all of your ideas, all of the love for all of these objects, everything out there, this imagined out there that you're going to get rid of, doesn't really exist out there. We can't validate that there's anything out there because by the time we become aware of it, it's a thought. It's come in through a sense, and we don't know where the senses lead to. We don't know what they're looking at or what they're feeling, right? We have a misunderstanding of them. So by renouncing thought, silencing the mind, that's the biggest act of renunciation that you can come up with. Giving up your constant desire to think about things, right? To giving up your constant desire to have an opinion, to be important, to have a plan, to be in charge, to do, to earn, to learn, to think, to say something brilliant, to be witty, to be hilarious. All of those things happen in the mind. And in order for you to have that quiet mind, the peace that passes all understanding, which is the natural mind, that's the normal condition of the human mind, that sits there at rest in the presence of the divine, in the sameness of the divine, and it's only activated when it's useful in the moment. But when it's done, the tool's finished, you lay it down. Renunciation happens there. And that's the most important renunciation, because if you can have that renunciation toward your own thinking, then all of your vices fall in line. That's how you take charge of the body. That's how you take charge of the mind. It's in that silence, you see. But that ego won't let go so much. That ego will argue, well, no, you don't need to, that ego will actually start to try and teach you how to silence the mind. That's that's the hilarity of it. It'll come in there and be like, oh, wait, no, say this, do your mantra this way. That'll help you. It's like, no, you as the observer are the only person in your mind. You're the only one present. There's no one else in there that's sentient. That's an interesting thing to think about, because why is the mind so noisy? It doesn't make any sense. When you think, you're talking to yourself, right? What are you telling yourself that you don't already know? If the talker in your mind knows something and is saying it to you, then you're the very same person. Don't you already know it? So what's the point of having this noise in the mind, having an ongoing narrative about everything in the day? There's no point to it. You're one. And you have an instant, spontaneous access to anything that the mind would decide to tell you. You don't have to run it through the mind. That is not who you are. And that's how you let go of your identification as an ego self, is by realizing that this noisy mind is just the ego digging up the past at every moment to create a sensation of itself being separate and apart from everything else. And the best way to be apart from something else is to talk about it. Because if you talk about it, you're clearly separate and apart from it. Shut the self up, shut the noise up, shut the mind off, and you're at one. You'll see and sense that unity. You'll feel that togetherness with the beloved. And in that intense state of witness, what does it mean to be a witness? It means to simply be a witness. Witnesses are not sitting there having opinions and ideas about everything going on. They're not. They're just watching. They're not thinking. They're not analyzing. They're not opinionating. They're just observing everything. So you turn your mind into a satellite dish sensitive to the beloved. That's how the mind becomes quiet. That's how you become the witness. That's how we experience, big quotes around experience, God, that one without a second. Chaitanya Deva set out on a pilgrimage to southern India. One day, he saw a man reading the Gita. Another man, seated at a distance, was listening and weeping. His eyes were swimming in tears. Chaitanya Deva asked him, "Do you understand all this?" The man said, "No, revered sir, I do not understand even a word of the text." "Then why are you crying?" asked Chaitanya. The devotee said, "I see Arjuna's chariot before me. I see Lord Krishna and Arjuna seated in front of it talking. I see this, and I weep." Why does a Vijnani keep an attitude of love toward God? The answer is that I consciousness persists. It disappears in the state of samadhi, no doubt, but it comes back. In the case of ordinary people, the I never disappears. You may cut down this aswatha tree, but the next day the sprouts are going to shoot up. Everyone laughs. Even after the attainment of knowledge, this I consciousness comes up. Nobody knows from where. You dream of a tiger, then you awake, but your heart, it keeps on pounding, palpitating. All our suffering is due to this I. The cow cries, "Hamba, hamba," which means I. That is why it suffers so much. It is yoked to the plow, and it's made to work in the rain and the sun. Then it may be killed by the butcher. From its hide, shoes will be made, and drums, which are then mercilessly beaten. Still, it does not escape suffering. At last, strings are made out of its entrails for the bows used in carding cotton. Then it no longer says "Hamba, hamba, I," but tu, thou, thou. Only then are its troubles over. O Lord, I am your servant. Thou art the master. I am the child. Thou art the mother. Once, Rama asked Hanuman, "How do you look on me? How do you look on me?" "O Rama, as long as I have the feeling of I see that thou art the whole and that I am a part. Thou art the master and I am thy servant. But when, O Rama, when I have the knowledge of truth, then I realize that thou art I and I am thou." The relationship of master and servant is the proper one. Since this I must remain, let the rascal be God's servant. I and mine, these constitute ignorance, right? Ignorance is what covers God, veils the divine. So what is this I and mine? This is what keeps your mind active. That's what the local mind is constantly maintaining, the sense of I and mine, me and mine. All of its thinking is just the mind only gets noisy when those two elements are stirring it, the ideas of me and mine, the ideas of separateness, right? And so as you give up separateness, what you're giving up is thought, because it is thought that makes you feel separate from everything, because thought is language, naming, pointing, subject, object. It's created the world of objects for you. I and mine, these constitute ignorance. My house, my wealth, my learning, my possessions. The attitude that prompts one to say such things comes of ignorance. On the contrary, the attitude born of knowledge is, "O God, thou art the master, and all these things belong to you. House, family, children, attendants, friends are thine." Right? Even your own mind is God's. Even your ego is God's. Even your very own sense of self is God's. You have nothing. And it's a wonderful practice to keep that in mind also. So like when you're eating, you know, you can't do this all the time, but it's a great thing to do every now and then. As you eat, consider your mouth to be the shrine, right? You put the food on the shrine. And who's tasting? You're not tasting. Mother is tasting. Your ideal is tasting. Jesus is tasting. Buddha is tasting. So you swallow without having an opinion, without paying any attention to the taste of the food. You offer the taste with the food to the beloved through the shrine, right? And it goes down here onto the fire, goes into the fire, and this is where it's burned and consumed, right? And the heat of that flame is your life, your energy, the way that you live. You, all of your actions, everything that you say, think, and do in a day is your incense smoke from a worship that is happening on this shrine, Nachiketas's shrine. But this shrine has your name on it, right? And you're doing the worship with your name on it. And everything that you do, say, think in a day, everything that you take in through the senses, goes on to this shrine, it gets consumed and causes an action, which is the smell of incense, causes an action or causes a thought, causes a doing. All of that is what you are giving to the beloved, to the divine. That's the dance that's always going on. And so even when you're eating, understand that you are a shrine. You are an altar. And everything going in, whether it's through the mouth, through the ears, through the eyes, or through touch, everything going in is going on this altar with your name on it. And your life is your puja. Your life is what you're offering. Every breath, every thought, every existence. One should constantly remember death. Why? Because it puts everything in its place. One should constantly remember death. Nothing will survive death. We are born into this world to perform certain duties, like the people who come from the countryside to Calcutta on business. If a visitor goes to a rich man's garden, the superintendent says to him, "This is our garden, this is our lake," and so forth. But if the superintendent is dismissed for some misdeed, he can't carry away even the mango wood chest. He sends it secretly by the gatekeeper. So there's all this laughter. It's like that's why we think of death. Because death will remind you that everything in this world has an expiration date, which means no matter what you pick up, you're not taken with you. So keep that idea alive, keep that idea alive. And it keeps the attachment to a minimum if you just know, right? It's like when you go out and you buy that fancy new car, probably one of the best things you could do is bring it home and scratch it right away. So that you don't have that attachment to it. Let it be already an old car. Know that it's going to be in the junk heap one day. God laughs. Yes, he does. God laughs on two occasions. He laughs when the physician says to the patient's mother, "Don't be afraid, mother. I shall certainly cure your boy." God laughs, saying to himself, "I'm going to take his life, and this man says that he will save it." The physician thinks he is the master, forgetting that God is the master. God laughs again when two brothers divide their land with a string, saying to each other, "This side is mine, and that side is yours." He laughs and says to himself, "The whole universe belongs to me. How can they say that they own this portion or that portion?" Can one know God through reasoning? Be his servant. Surrender yourself to him, and then pray to him. To Vidyasagar with a smile. Well, what's your attitude? Vidyasagar smiling. Well, someday I'll confide that to you. Everyone laughs. The master laughing. God cannot be realized through mere scholarly reasoning. Intoxicated with divine love, the Master sang. Who is there that can understand what Mother Kali is? Even the six darshanas are powerless to reveal her. It is she, the scriptures say, that is the inner self of the yogi, who in self discovers all his joy. She that, of her own sweet will, inhabits every living being. The macrocosm, the microcosm, they rest in the mother's womb. Now, do you see how vast it is? The Muladhara, the yogi meditates on her, and in the Sahasrara, who but Shiva has beheld her as she really is? Within the lotus wilderness, she sports beside her mate, the swan. When man aspires to understand her, Ram Prasad must smile. To think of knowing her, he says, is quite as laughable as to imagine that one can swim across this boundless sea. But while my mind has understood, alas, my heart has not. Though but a dwarf, it still would strive to make a captive of the moon. You see here it's being set up. You're being asked to capture the moon. And your practice every day is practicing to capture the moon. Now, does that mean you think you're going to capture that moon one day? No. It means you're going to practice and practice until you get it and you realize there ain't no way for me to reach that moon. There's no way for me to capture that. And at that point, the ego is broken. The ego, the separateness from God, collapses because it sees the futility of that separateness. It sees the meaninglessness of being the doer, of thinking yourself the doer. And so at that point, you sit down and you weep to Mother, and she comes. But what he says a couple of things up here, though, in this song that are just absolutely beautiful. You see, it is she, the scriptures say, that is the inner self of the yogi. So you, while you're practicing, that inner self, that's what you're trying to be quiet enough to become aware of, is your very existence, your very awareness. You become aware of awareness. That awareness is your mother. That awareness is your beloved. You see how intimate that is. And for that intimacy, how silent you have to be able to experience your own awareness as the presence of the mother, of your beloved. So it is she, the scriptures say, that is the inner self of the yogi, who in self discovers all his joy. All right. So this is important too, because the joy in your life, real joy, joy that lasts, can only come from inside you. If you're getting joy from anywhere else, it's a temporary joy. It's an addicting joy that you're going to have to serve continually in order to experience. And chances are it's coming in through either the mind or the body. So you're going to have to meet the demands, the constantly changing demands of your body and your mind in order to get that joy. But the joy that we are in search of is this presence of the mother within. This unchanging absolute at the very center of your being, which is your beloved, the source of an endless love, the source of an infinite mercy and grace. And this is for the yogi, for the man or woman who knows. This is where all of your joy comes from. Nowhere else. Nothing else is necessary. So she that of her own sweet will inhabits every living being. So she's become you because she wants to. She lives in you because she wants to. She touches you and loves you, nurtures you, keeps your existence going, keeps your love going. Why? Because she wants to. That's always a beautiful thing to remember. God never leaves. It's us that turns away, or us that gets forgetful, or us that doesn't look. But God never goes away. never separates from us. Continuing, the master said, did you notice the macrocosm and the microcosm rest in the mother's womb? Now do you see how vast it is? Again, the poet says, even the 6 darsanas are powerless to reveal her. She cannot be realized by means of mere scholarship. A very important point, because mere scholarship is just an arrangement of thinking, of thoughts in the mind, putting objects into boxes and tying them together with relationships. That's the mind. You cannot realize God by something that you know. That's not what's happening here. That's not why we study, right? We study for the same reason that that man we just read about, who couldn't understand a word of the Gita, but as he heard the Gita being read, he saw God. He saw his beloved Krishna. He saw the chariot. That's why we read. That's why we study. That's why we practice. Not for some distant thing that will come out of pie in the sky in the future. We practice to experience the presence of the divine here and now. We are not preparing ourselves for something somewhere else. Nothing else exists except here and now. All of our work is for now, for this moment, to realize God, to experience the presence of love. One must have faith and love. Let me tell you how powerful faith is. A man who was about to cross the sea from Ceylon to India, Bibhishana, said to him, tie this thing in the corner of your wearing cloth, and you will cross the sea safely. You will be able to walk on the water. But be sure not to examine it, or you will sink. The man was walking easily on the water of the sea. Such is the strength of faith. When, having gone part of the way, he thought, what's bringing him down? He thought. He brought his ego in there. He started reconsidering what's going on and what's being said. It's now he's become the doer, put himself in charge in his mind. He says, when having gone part of the way, he thought, what is this wonderful thing that Bibhishana has given me, that I can walk even on the water? He untied the knot and found only a leaf with the name of Rama written on it. Oh, just this, he thought. And instantly he sank. See what a great lesson that is. When you sit there and practice, when you sit in the presence of God, it's not yours to exercise ego by analyzing, oh, how nice I feel. Oh, what a good meditation this is today. Oh, I've said my mantra 3,000 times now. Oh, I think this is my 4th time around the mala. That's not it. That's the ego engaging thought. So we're not fully present. Whenever ego is engaging thought, we're always using the past. We're never in the now. If you're thinking, you're always in the past. Because for that process to get started to the point where you hear a thought, that thought is about something that's already happened now. It's no longer present. So to be in the present means to spontaneously know these things directly from big mind, not from the little local mind that's just got shelving in it with lots of objects and relationships piled in there. That's not where this happens, right? We're trying to find the questioner. Who in you wants to know God? What in you is asking questions? What in you is interested in the eyes, interested in what's coming in the ears? Who is getting all of this information? That is where we would need to be. And that does not happen here, right? Because this gets shown to this, right? When you think, the noise is the mind is talking, it's presenting something to you. It's presenting the thoughts to you. And if something is presenting something to you, it's obviously not you. So the thinking, the noise of your mind, the personality that you've generated up here that skips around in your conscious mind is not the self. That's not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is silent. What we're looking for is still. What we're looking for is perfectly balanced, perfectly harmonized, perfectly content, perfectly stable, utterly unchanging. You cannot find such a thing with senses. Senses can only find things that change. Senses can only sense things that change. They cannot pick up the immortal, ever-present, unchanging absolute of the divine. There is a popular saying that Hanuman jumped over the sea through his faith in Rama's name, but Rama himself had to build a bridge. If a man has faith in God, then he need not be afraid, though he may have committed sin, nay, the vilest of sin. That's a beautiful promise to you right there. It's your faith in God, your assumption of that embracing love, your assumption that God's grace is enough for you, right? In a real way. Because if someone has been so kind to you, you don't pay them back with with trash. You're inspired. You're inspired to pay them back with whatever you can find to give them, right? So you'll know that you understand faith when your life is spontaneously inspired to virtue, to love, to selflessness, to caring. If a man has faith in God, then he need not be afraid, though he may have committed sin, nay, even the vilest of sin. Then Sri Ramakrishna sang a song glorifying the power of faith. If only I can pass away, repeating Durga's name, how can you then, O Blessed One, withhold from me my deliverance, wretched though I may be? The Master continued, faith and devotion. One realizes God easily through devotion. He is grasped through ecstasy of love. With these words, the Master sang again, how are you trying, O my mind, to know the nature of God? You are groping like a madman locked in a dark room. He is grasped through ecstatic love. How can you fathom him without it? Only through affirmation, never negation, can you know him. Neither through Veda, nor through Tantra, nor the 6 darshanas. It is in love's elixir only that he delights, O mind. He dwells in the body's inmost depths in everlasting joy. And for that love, the mighty yogi practiced yoga from age to age. When love awakens, the Lord, like a magnet, draws to him the soul. He it is, that says Ram Prasad, that I approach as mother. But must I give away the secret here in the marketplace? From the hints I have given, O mind, guess what that being is. And that's when you sit for meditation, right there. It'd be wonderful to read that little bit before meditation, because that's what you do. You go sit in meditation, guess who that is, you know. While singing, the master went into samadhi. He was seated on the bench facing the west, the palms of his hands joined together, his body erect and motionless. Everyone watched him expectantly. Vidyasagar too was speechless and could not take his eyes from the master. After a time, Sri Ramakrishna showed signs of regaining the normal state. He drew a deep breath and said with a smile, the means of realizing God are ecstasy of love and devotion. That is, one must love God. He who is Brahman is addressed as the mother. He it is, says Ramprasad, that I approach as mother. But must I give away the secret here in the marketplace? From the hints I have given, O mind, guess what that being is. Ramprasad asks the mind only to guess the nature of God. He wishes it to understand what is called Brahman in the Vedas is addressed by him as mother. He who is attributeless also has attributes. He who is Brahman is also Shakti. When thought of as inactive, he is called Brahman. And when thought of as the creator, preserver, and destroyer, he is called the primordial energy, Kali. All right. Let's stop there for the evening. Does anybody have any questions or something you want to run over again or talk about? I love how many times the laughter is happening on those just those few pages that we left. At least 10 times people were laughing. I think that's the best attitude for spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You guys are thugs. You'll never get there. You might as well laugh it off until mother brings you.
It's hardcore.
Until mother brings us home, what can we do, right? Yeah, most definitely.
God.
You think you can capture the moon. All right. Very good. Go ahead. Let me tell you how to do it. Ecstasy of love. The ecstasy of love. You must love God, but how hard is it to love God? How hard is it to love love? God is the noun of love, the unchanging love. You are the verb of God. In your ideal sense, you only express big mind. You only express that immortal, unlimited, unconditioned love. That's how we love our enemies. We don't have any. That's how we love our friends. We don't have any. We love. That's all. Just
The
love.
state of being verb, right?
What's that?
Isn't that a state of being verb? Like
Yes.
is? Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
We
Who'd have
are
thought
we
that's
are
what
the
we were?
verb. Yeah, we are the verb. All we have to do is know the noun and we'll be in tune. We'll be in harmony.
Yep.
When we don't have our eye on the beloved, when we're not aware of that presence, of that love, if we're not aware of our nature, if we think we're just some machine, just some, flesh box that runs around eating the world, tasting the world, if that's what we are, we grow bitter, we grow lonely, we go angry, we grow empty, you know. It's only through this knowledge of the beloved that we're renewed every minute. Ili Chiara, that Romanian mystic, he makes such a wonderful portrait. He says, the world, that which we observe, is always changing. It is change itself. It's always fresh, always new. It never repeats. And we have to meet it with a self that's equally open, equally unattached to any condition. That presence. So in that, you're going to laugh one day. I remember I remember back in college, I think I told this story before, but I was walking, it was my last final and it was a history final. And I hadn't studied for it at all. I mean, the night before I tried, but I had been studying for, it was the last final. I had just been studying for 2 weeks solid. And I literally, the night before, I'm sure, I hope other people have had that experience when you just can't do it. I'm not even going to open the book, and you just go to bed. You just turn off the light and go to bed and hope you fall asleep before you realize what you've done. And so I went to bed and I got up the next morning and I was 10 a.m. I was walking to the auditorium where this uh, final was being held. And I was sitting there and I was kind of giggling nervously to myself because I was like, holy cow, I've not even cracked that book. And for history. You know, history. You can fake your way through an English lecture, no problem. But faking your way through a history test, it's like, it's not going to happen. And I remember I was really sitting there, really starting to sweat some bullets on the way to the auditorium. And then I had this wonderful thought occur in my head. I thought, in 5 years, it's not going to matter. Just go in and do your best. And, here I am now, a good, healthy, 40 years, 40 years out. And I can tell you, I don't care at all. That thing that seemed so important at that time, that thing that seemed like was going to ruin my whole life, I don't even care. Don't even remember what I got on that test. Don't remember a single answer. That's what this world is. That's what all these things in this world that we think are so important. One view of this beloved, one moment of this ecstatic existence of reality. Who cares? Mercedes Schmades, throw it away. Give me a bicycle. Give me my legs.
Yeah.
So, all right, everyone. Enjoy God. Enjoy your practice. And know that all of your ignorance is just make-believe. You'll get over it. No worries. Faith and grace will bring you home. Jai
Thank
Ma.
you, Swamiji. Jai Ma.
All right,
Good
be
night,
well.
bye.
Good
Be
night.
well, everyone.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.